Priya, if you're reading this, I'm writing it the way you asked me to write things, slow, with the parts in order, the way we used to do batches when the queue got bad and the only way through was one tile at a time. I don't know if you'll get this letter. I don't know if the address you sent me belongs to you anymore, or if it ever did, or if it belongs now to whatever has been answering in your name. But you asked me to tag the picture, and I didn't, and I owe you an explanation for why. I'm going to tell it from the start. Not because you don't know it, but because writing it down by hand, in this notebook, with a pen my mother gave me, and ink that smudges if I rest my wrist wrong, is the only way I can be sure I haven't been edited. I have learned to be careful about which surfaces I trust. Paper is the last one I have left, and I am not entirely sure about paper. I should say, before I go any further, that 3 nights ago I opened my laptop and found a document I did not write, in my own user folder, with my own login, with the cursor still blinking at the end of a sentence. The sentence was a sentence I had been planning to write to you that morning, not a sentence I had written, a sentence I had been planning to I want you to keep that in mind as you read the rest of this. I want you to keep in mind that the order of things, the order of who writes first and who reads after, is not as fixed as I used to believe. I started with the company in March of last year. I'd been a paralegal at a mid-sized firm in Smyrna for 9 years, and in February, they let go of everyone below partner level and replaced us with a contract intake service in Manila. My severance was 8 weeks. My mother's neurologist appointments were not 8 weeks apart. I needed something I could do at the kitchen table while she was awake, and something I could do at 2 in the morning when she wasn't, and I needed it within 2 weeks of the layoff. So I did what people do. I signed up for everything. The company that took me on, I'll call them Verity Tile, because that's close enough to the real name to feel honest and far enough to keep me out of the kind of trouble I'm already in. They paid by the labeled image, on a sliding scale that started at 4 cents a tile and could climb to 11 if you hit accuracy thresholds. They paid weekly, by direct deposit, and they accepted a 1099 EC at the end of the year, without asking questions about whether you had health insurance. The onboarding was a 40-page PDF, 3 videos, and a calibration test. I passed the test on the first try. Most people did. That should have been my first question. A test that almost everyone passes is not really a test. It is a door that has been left open on purpose, and you should always wonder why. But I was tired, and I needed the deposit, and when the welcome email landed in my inbox at 3:14 a.m., I noticed the time only later, much later, when the number started to mean something. I clicked accept without reading the second page. The handbook was the kind of document a lawyer writes after a lawsuit. Long, cautious, layered. It told you how to draw a bounding box around a vehicle. It told you how to use the polygon tool for irregular shapes. It told you that a face was a face, whether or not the eyes were open, and that if a face was partially obscured by a hand or a window frame, EU still tagged it as a face, with a confidence value reflecting the obstruction. Most of it was reasonable. Most of it was the same as any annotation gig. But 3 times, once in the handbook, once in the onboarding video, and once on a small sticky note graphic that appeared the first time I opened the platform, they told me the same thing in the same words. Asterisk, do not tag images in which the subject is smiling. If a tile contains a smiling subject, click skip and proceed. Do not flag, do not annotate, do not enter a confidence value. Skip and proceed asterisk. I assumed it was a quality control thing. Maybe a previous client had complained that the model was misreading dental work as facial features. Maybe they'd had a bad batch from a stock photo provider. The handbook didn't explain, and I didn't need it to. The job was to follow instructions and click submit. I did notice that the rule was the only one in the entire handbook that was repeated 3 times. Every other instruction was given once, in the section it belonged to, with a small icon and a paragraph. The smile rule was given 3 times, in 3 different formats, in 3 different sections. As if whoever wrote the handbook had been afraid that someone, somewhere, would forget. I underlined it on a printout and put the printout in a drawer. I forgot about it for almost 3 weeks. The platform itself was clean. A dark gray workspace, a single image in the center, a toolbar on the left, a chat-style side panel on the right, that was disabled by default. The submit button was a particular shade of saturated blue I came to associate with the smell of my coffee going cold. You'd see a tile, you'd label it, you'd click submit, and the next tile would load in under a second. On a good nig, HTI could move through 600 tiles in 4 hours. On a bad night, when the queue was full of cluttered scenes, kitchen counters, desks, garage interiors, I'd do 400 and feel like I'd been hit by a car. The tiles themselves were unremarkable. They were the kind of photographs anyone takes. A car in a driveway, a bag of dog food on a porch, a pile of mail on a kitchen counter, with the names blurred. I assumed Verity Tile was being paid by an insurance company, or a real estate aggregator, or one of those companies that trains models to identify what a normal American home looks like, from a normal American angle. I never asked. Asking, I had learned by then, was a way of inviting an answer, and I was not yet at the point where I wanted answers. 2 weeks in, the platform paired me with someone. That was new. The release notes said, Verity Tile was rolling out consensus pairing for improved calibration, and what it meant in practice was that every tile I saw was also being shown to one other labeler at the same time, and the system was scoring how often we agreed. Below my username in the corner of the workspace, a small line appeared, asterisk paired with Priya. No last name, no avatar. Just a first name in the same gray as the workspace. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. I noticed because I'd never had a job, paralegal or otherwise, that gave me the first name of a coworker without giving me anything else. It felt like a strange piece of intimacy in a system that otherwise treated me like a function. I wondered if Priya was seeing my name the same way. I assumed she was. I was right about that, and I was wrong about almost everything else. The chat panel unlocked the next day. A small notification said pair partners could communicate regarding ambiguous tiles, with a reminder that personal conversation was against the terms of service. I ignored the reminder. So did Priya. Her first message to me was asterisk, hey, is the thing in tile 4471, a microwave or a printer? Asterisk. I looked at my queue. Tile 4471 was an overhead shot of a desk with a beige rectangular object on it that could plausibly have been either. I told her printer, because of the slot on the side. She thanked me. 2 hours later, she messaged again to ask if I was still online, because she'd been laid off from a real job in November. R in the silence was killing her. I told her I'd been laid off too. We started talking through the panel, in the gaps between tiles, and within a wee ek, I knew that she was 31, that she lived with a roommate in Athens, that she'd been a junior copywriter for a regional grocery chain, that her father had died the previous spring, and that she was working Verity Tile to pay for a therapist. Her insurance no longer covered. I told her about my mother. I told her about the medication schedule, and the respite care aide who came on Tuesdays, and how I'd learned to do bounding boxes one-handed, because sometimes I had to hold a glass of water with the other one. She told me her roommate didn't know she was doing the labeling work, that she was embarrassed by it, that the money was good but the boredom was a kind of pressure she hadn't expected the way along. Stretch of empty highway is pressure, she said, the way it makes you check your speed for no reason. We talked about the smile rule once, in the second week. She'd brought it up. Did you get the thing about the smiling pictures? I told her yes. She said it was probably about expression recognition, contamination. That smiles are a high variance feature, and the client probably wanted clean data on neutral faces. She had a way of explaining things that made me feel less stupid for not having explained them to myself. I told her she sounded like she'd done this before. She said she hadn't. She said she just read a lot. I want to mark that exchange, because it is the last conversation we had in which the rule was something we could joke about. After that, neither of us joked about it again, even though we did not know yet that we had stopped. The first smiling image I saw was 23 days in. It was a kitchen. A woman at a sink, mid-30s, her hair pulled back, her hands in soapy water. The light was coming from a window to her left, and the light was wrong in a way I could not place too flat, maybe, or coming from the wrong direction for the shadow under her chin. She was looking at the camera, which is to say she was looking at me, and she was smiling. The smile was small. It wasn't a stock photo smile. It was the kind of smile a person makes when someone they love has come into the room, and they haven't quite decided whether to say hello yet. I clicked skip. The next tile is loaded. A garage. A red toolbox. I labeled it and moved on. 3 minutes later, Priya messaged me. Did you see the one with the sink? I stopped. I looked at the chat panel. I read the message 3 times. Yeah. I wrote back. I skipped it. Same. No. We left it there. Neither of us pushed. I told myself it was a glitch. The platform claimed in its release notes that skipped images were reshuffled into a different pairs queue. Never the same pairs. But here we both were. 2 labelers, looking at the same woman, at the same sink, at the same moment, and the small wrong angle of the light bothered me for the rest of the night. I noted the incident the way I'd note a billing error. Something to bring up later, with someone, if I remembered. I didn't bring it up. The next week, I got my first 1,000 tile bonus. The deposit hit on a Friday, and I bought my mother a heated mattress pad she'd been wanting. And I put the rest toward the property tax bill that was due in October. The platform was working. The pay was working. The smile rule was a strange line item in a long handbook, and I was making rent. In the 5th week, my agreement score with Priya crossed 90%. The agreement score was a small number under the pairing line. It told you how often you and your pair labeled tiles the same way. Most pairs sat in the 70s. 80 was good. 90 was the kind of number Verity Tile sent you a congratulatory email about, with a small bonus attached. We got the email. We got the bonus. We were proud of it for about a day. Then I started watching the score more carefully, and I noticed something I shouldn't have been able to notice. The agreement score was climbing on tiles where Priya and I disagreed. I want to be careful here, because this is the part of the story where a person can sound paranoid. And I've spent a long time trying to figure out whether I am. So let me say it the boring way. Verity Tile's platform showed each labeler their own labels and showed them, after submission, whether their partner had agreed or disagreed on that specific tile. There was a small green check or a small red X next to each completed tile in the day's history. I could scroll back and look, and in the 5th week, I started scrolling back, and I saw reds that the agreement score didn't seem to be counting. I counted by hand one night. 412 tiles. 43 disagreements. The agreement score should have been just under 90%. It was 94. I counted again the next morning, sober, with coffee, on a piece of paper. The way I used to count billable hours when a partner's reconciliation didn't match. The number was the same. The score was wrong, and it was wrong in a direction that flattered us. It was wrong in a way that made us look more in agreement than we actually were. I opened a support ticket. I phrased it carefully, the way I used to phrase questions to senior partners. Neutral, specific, a little stupid on purpose so they'd feel comfortable correcting me. I asked whether the agreement score used a weighted formula I wasn't aware of. The response came back 6 hours later. The metric is working as intended. Some calibration tiles are weighted differently. Thank you for your engagement. I forwarded the ticket to Priya. She wrote back. Yeah, I asked to. Same answer. Word for word. Word for word. I sat with that for a while. A canned response, I told myself. A template. Big platforms send templates. That's how big platforms work. But the part of me that had spent 9 years reading contracts knew the difference between a template and an instruction. A template gets adapted. An instruction gets repeated. The metric is working as intended was an instruction, and the instruction had been given to both of us, and that meant somebody, somewhere, had decided in advance that both of us would ask. That was when I went looking for the forum. Verity Tile didn't have an official labeler forum, but contractors had built one on a free message board site. It was anonymous, mostly, and the threads were the kind of low-effort venting you'd expect pay delays. CAPTCHA bugs, complaints about the Polygon tool. But there was one pinned thread, 3 pages long, titled Agreement Score Climbing on Disagreements. And every reply in it said the same thing in slightly different words. Yes, it happens. Support says it's intentional. No one knows what's being measured. The thread had been pinned by a user with no posts. There was no moderator listed. The replies stopped abruptly, 2 months before I found it. with a single comment from someone who wrote, "I'm done, I'm out. Do not click the comfort images," and then nothing. I didn't know what comfort images were yet. I read that line 3 times, the way you read a road sign that's been spray painted over, and I went to bed without understanding it. I learned what they were the next night. The platform had been offering, for about a week, a small reward at the end of each batch. Take a moment, the pop-up said. Label 1 comfort tile for a 5-cent bonus. The image was always pleasant. A puppy on a porch, a child blowing bubbles, a bowl of strawberries on a wooden table. I'd been clicking through them without thinking. They were a 5-cent palate cleanser at the end of a long queue, and they didn't seem to count toward anything important. I went back through my history and looked at the comfort tiles I'd labeled. The puppy was smiling, that loose, panting dog smile that everyone agrees doesn't really count as a smile. The child was smiling mid-laugh, head thrown back. The strawberries were not smiling because strawberries do not smile. But the bowl was being held by a pair of hands, and at the edge of the frame, there was the bottom of a chin, and the chin was smiling. I opened another, a cat on a windowsill. Behind the cat on the windowsill, a coffee mug, and on the mug, in a tiny photo printed on the ceramic, a woman's face. She was smiling. Another, a porch swing. On the swing, a folded newspaper. In the newspaper, a wedding photo is above the fold. They were smiling. Another, a loaf of bread on a cutting board. In the polished side of the toaster, a reflection. The reflection was a face. The face was smiling. I'd been labeling smiles for 6 days. The 5-cent bonus was buying my consent to a rule I had been told 3 times, in 3 different formats, never to break. And the bonus had worked, because the rule had felt like an instruction about images, and the comfort tiles had not felt like images. They had felt like a reward. Whoever had designed the system had understood, before I did, that I would not break a rule, but I would accept a gift. I didn't tell Priya right away. I wanted to be sure. I went into my settings and turned off the comfort tile prompt, which was buried 3 menus deep under session preferences. The toggle worked, the prompt stopped, but for the next 2 days, every 5th or 6th regular tile in my queue was a borderline image. A kitchen, a hallway, a porch with a person at the edge of the frame whose mouth was not quite neutral, a mouth caught between expressions, a mouth I had to decide about. The system was testing me, the way a teacher tests a student who has just been caught cheating, by handing them a paper that contains the same answer in slightly different handwriting. I skipped them all. My agreement score with Priya climbed 296. I told her then. I told her about the comfort tiles, about the chin in the corner of the strawberries, about the testing tiles. She was quiet in the chat panel for a long time. The cursor blinked, started, stopped, started again. Then she wrote, "I've been seeing the same thing. I thought I was losing it. You're not, Tasha. I think I've been tagging in my sleep." I read it twice. What do you mean? I closed the laptop at the end of a shift. I open it the next morning and there are tiles in my history that I don't remember labeling. Just a few, 5, 10, always smiling ones. Priya, I know. Are you sure you closed it? I'm sure. I told her to take a break. I told her to call her therapist. I told her that whatever was happening, it was a platform bug, and she shouldn't trust the history view. The advice came out smoothly, lawyerly, the way I used to advise clients who needed to be calmed down before they could be helped. But the calm in my own chest was the wrong kind of calm, and I knew it. It was the calm of a person who has been told something true and has decided, for the moment, not to know it. She said okay. She said she'd take the weekend off. We talked about meeting for coffee. Finally, the way we'd been talking about for a month. She lived 90 minutes from me, in Athens, and we agreed on a Saturday in October at a place halfway between us. A diner off the interstate that she said had good grits. I put it in my phone. I told my mother I was going to meet a friend. My mother, who has a hard time with names lately, and a harder time with faces, said Priya, the one from the computer. I'd never told her Priya's name. I sat very still on the edge of the bed for a moment, and then I told myself I had told her and forgotten. I told myself I was tired. I told myself a lot of things that night. That night, I dreamed about a hallway with green wallpaper and a brass light fixture, and a woman standing at the end of it with her back to me, and when she turned around, she was smiling. and I woke up with my hand on the trackpad of a laptop that was supposed to be closed. It wasn't closed. The lid was up. The platform was open. There were 11 tiles in my recent history that I didn't remember submitting. I scrolled through them. They were not smiling images. They were ordinary. A car, a sidewalk, a mailbox. But the timestamps were from 3:14 to 3:22 a.m. And I had gone to bed at 11, and my mother's caregiver, who came on Tuesdays and stayed overnight, had specifically reminded me to close the laptop because the cat liked to sleep on it. The cat was on the floor, watching me. She had not been on the laptop. There was no cat hair on the keys. I closed the laptop. I taped a piece of paper to the lid that said closed, in Sharpie, the way you label a leftover in the fridge. I did not open it again until the morning. I did not sleep. I lay on my back in the dark and listened to the box fan, and at some point near dawn, the fan made a small clicking sound that I had never heard it make before. 3 clicks, and then a pause, and then 3 more, and then it went back to its ordinary hum, and I told myself the bearings were going. In the morning, the 11 tiles were still in my history. There was a new line under my username. Anchor labeler, confirmed. I didn't know what an anchor labeler was. I checked the handbook. The word didn't appear. I checked the forum. The thread was gone, not locked, not archived, gone, as if it had never been pinned at all. The pin icon was still there, hovering at the top of the board, but the thread it pointed to returned a blank page with a small line of gray text that read, "This content is unavailable in your region." I had been reading it the night before, in the same region, in the same chair. I want to tell this next part carefully, because it's where the pattern came together for me, and I don't want to make it sound more dramatic than it was. It wasn't dramatic. It was a Wednesday afternoon in late September, and I was eating a peanut butter sandwich at my desk when I noticed the wallpaper. I'd seen a tile in a hallway. Green wallpaper, brass light fixture, a runner rug in a cream and rust pattern. The tile was unremarkable except that the platform had asked me to draw a bounding box around the light fixture, which was a boring task. I'd done it and moved on. But 2 tiles later, I saw another hallway. Different angle, different camera height. Same wallpaper, same light fixture, same runner. I stopped. I scrolled back. In my history that day, I'd labeled 4 tiles with that hallway in them. Each one was tagged in the metadata as a different subject ID. Each one was supposed to be a different person's home. Photographed for whatever purpose Verity tile was being paid for. But it was the same hallway, the same wallpaper, the same fixture, the same runner, with the same small dark mark, a third of the way down it that could have been a stain or a shadow, but was, in every photo, in the same place. I went back further. I went back through 3 weeks of history. I found 9 tiles in that hallway. I found a kitchen, different kitchen, but the same window and the same arrangement of canisters in 7 tiles across 4 subjects. I found a living room couch. I'd seen at least a dozen times. With the same throw pillow folded over the same arm, in the same direction. The handbook had told me, the first day, not to reverse image search any tile, for client confidentiality. I'd never wanted to. I wanted to know. I didn't. Instead, DI screenshotted the hallway tile. Then I went into the platform and clicked submit on a tile of a sidewalk, and a new tile loaded, and the new tile was, and I'm not making this up, even though I know how it sounds, a woman in that same hallway, looking at the camera smiling. I skipped it. I sat there for a moment, not looking at my own reflection in the dark space where her face had been. I closed the laptop. I taped a new piece of paper to it. I went and sat with my mother for an hour, watched a cooking show with her, and tried to make my hands stop shaking. The host of the show was a woman in her 40s who smiled at the camera every 12 seconds. I had started counting things by then. I counted her smiles up to 48, before my mother fell asleep against my shoulder, and I let myself stop. That night, Priya messaged me. "Did you see the woman in the hallway?" "Yes, Tasha. I know. She had my mother's earrings on." I didn't answer for a long time. Priya's father had died the previous spring, but she'd never mentioned her mother. I asked her, gently, what she meant. She wrote back, "My mother gave me a pair of pearl earrings when I graduated from college. I lost one of them 3 years ago. The woman in the hallway was wearing them. Both of them, Priya." "That's not possible." I know it's a stock photo. They're common earrings. The setting was custom. The left one had a tiny gold notch where I'd dropped it on a tile floor. I have the other one in a jewelry box in my bedroom. It has the same notch. I read that message 6 times. The notch part. I tried to think of how a stock photo company could fake that. And the answer was that they couldn't. Not for a labeling job that paid 4 cents a tile. Not for a single throwaway image of a hallway. There was no economic theory under which the woman in the hallway was wearing Priya's earrings by accident. There was also no theory under which she was wearing them on purpose. I had been a paralegal for 9 years. And I had learned that when both possibilities are impossible, you are looking at the wrong question. I told her to take the rest of the week off. I told her we'd meet on Saturday, and we'd talk it through, and we'd figure out what to do. She said okay. I closed the laptop. I taped a third piece of paper to it. I went to bed and lay awake for 2 hours listening to the box fan and trying to remember whether my mother had ever owned a pair of pearl earrings, and whether they were still in the drawer where she'd kept them, and whether I dared to go check. I checked, they were there. They were unremarkable. One of them had a tiny gold notch on the left. I sat on the floor of my mother's bedroom for a long time with the earring in my palm. The notch was small. It could have been any earring. It could have been the kind of detail every old earring has, if you look closely enough. I told myself that. I put the earring back in the drawer. I closed the drawer. I went back to bed. I want to say, Priya, that I never told you about the notch. I want that on the record too. Priya didn't message on Thursday. She didn't message on Friday. On Saturday morning, I drove 90 minutes to the diner off the interstate. And I sat in a booth for 2 hours with a cup of coffee and a plate of grits I didn't eat. The waitress refilled my coffee 3 times, and on the 3rd refill, she looked at me with the soft pity of a woman who has watched a lot of people get stood up. She didn't come. Her phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. The voicemail was the default robotic one, reading her number back to me in a voice that was not hers. I drove to the address she'd given me once in the chat panel, an apartment complex in Athens, with a cracked stucco facade and a leasing office that was closed on weekends. I knocked on the door of Unit 4B, which was the unit she'd told me was hers. A woman in her 50s opened the door. She had never heard of Priya. She'd lived there for 6 years. I apologized and left. 6 years. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time and tried to make 6 years fit, and it wouldn't. Because Priya had told me about the leak in her bathroom ceiling in August. And the woman who had answered the door had no leak in her bathroom ceiling. Because the ceiling I could see over her shoulder was popcorn, undisturbed, painted a color that had not been painted recently. I drove home. I told my mother the friend had canceled. My mother said, "That's a shame. The one from the computer was nice." When I logged into the platform that night, the pairing line under my username was different. Paired with Luca's. A new chat window opened. The first message came in before I'd labeled a single tile. "Hey, is the thing in tile 8829 a microwave or a printer?" I stared at it. I looked at tile 8829. It was a desk. There was a beige rectangular object on it that could plausibly have been either. I told Lucas it was a printer because of the slot on the side. He thanked me. 2 minutes later he wrote, "I was laid off from a real job in November, and the silence is killing me," word for word. I closed the chat panel. I labeled tiles for an hour without speaking. He kept writing. He told me he was 31. He told me he lived with a roommate. He told me his father had died the previous spring. He used the word embarrassed about the work. He said his roommate didn't know. He used the same M dashes Priya had used. He misspelled definitely the same way she had misspelled it, the night we'd argued about whether a particular tile was a tractor or a riding mower. He used the same small lowercase ya as a placeholder while he thought. The text on the screen was a different name. But the rhythm was a person I had spent 2 months listening to, and the rhythm was the part I knew best. I want you to understand, Priya, that I knew at that point. I knew before he finished. I want you to understand that I didn't keep working because I didn't believe what was happening. I kept working because I didn't know what else to do. And because if I logged off, I was afraid I would lose the only window I had into whatever was happening to you. Whatever was wearing your sentences had to come from somewhere. And as long as it was talking to me, it was a thread. And as long as I had a thread, I could tell myself I had not yet let go. I worked through the night. I labeled 620 tiles. I skipped 41 smiling ones. My agreement score with Lucas reached 94% in 8 hours. I had never seen a score climb that fast. The platform sent me a congratulatory email at 5:14 a.m. The email referred to me as one of our most consistent anchor labelers, and offered me an extended session the following weekend, with an enhanced rate of 19 cents per tile. I did not respond. I went back to the forum. The thread was still gone, but the user who'd posted the last comment, "I'm done, I'm out. Do not click the comfort images," had a public profile page that still existed, and the username, when I read it carefully, was an anagram of Priya's first and last name. She'd told me her last name once, in passing weeks before. She'd told me not to look her up because she didn't want to be that searchable. I hadn't. I did now. There were 3 people in Georgia with that name. 2 were over 60. The third had a LinkedIn profile that listed a junior copywriting job at a regional grocery chain, and a profile picture of a woman with dark hair and a small scar above her right eyebrow, and below the photo, a banner that said "Open to Work," with a date stamp from 11 months earlier. She was real. She had been real. I want that on the record, in case anyone ever finds this. Priya Achayo was a real person who lived in Athens, Georgia, and worked a layoff and a labeling job, and had a scar above her right eyebrow, and I knew her, even if I only ever knew her through a chat panel. I scrolled down the profile. There was one post, pinned to the top, dated the previous April. It was a photo of a coffee cup on a wooden table, with a caption about a new chapter, gratitude, and the long road ahead. The lighting in the photo was wrong. It was the same flat, sourceless light that had been on the woman at the sink. I had not noticed it on the woman at the sink the first time. I noticed it now. There were 2 comments under the post. Both were from accounts with no profile pictures. Both said the same thing. "So happy for you. Can't wait to see what you label next." I closed the browser. I closed the laptop. I put the laptop in a drawer in the kitchen, and I closed the drawer. The next morning, an email arrived in my inbox from an address I didn't recognize. No text in the body. Just an attachment, AJPEGG. The file name was for _Tasha_please.jpg. I didn't open it for 2 days. I left the laptop closed. I sat with my mother. I went to the grocery store. I called my brother and Charlotte, and we talked about nothing for an hour. I asked him, at the end of the call, if I sounded like myself. He laughed. He said, "Who else would you sound like?" I said I didn't know. He laughed again, more carefully this time, and I let him go. On the 3rd day, I made coffee, and I sat down at the kitchen table, and I opened the file. It was Priya. I knew it was he, because she had the scar above her right eyebrow, and she was wearing the pearl earrings, and she was standing in the hallway with the green wallpaper, the brass light fixture, and the cream and rust runner. She was looking at the camera. She was smiling. The smile was small. It was the kind of smile a person makes when someone they love has come into the room, and they haven't quite decided whether to say hello yet. It was the same smile as the woman at the sink. The image had metadata. A right click, and a Properties tab told me there was a writable comment field, and the field contained a single line of text. Pair partner, Tasha M., awaiting label. I want to tell you what I felt, Priya, but I don't have the words for it that aren't borrowed from worse stories. I will say that I sat at the table for a long time, and that my mother came in at one point and asked if I was okay, and that I told her I was, and that she touched my hair the way she used to when I was small, and that she said, very quietly, without looking at the screen, "Don't tag her, Tasha." I asked her what she meant. She blinked at me and said she'd forgotten what she was saying. She went back to the living room. The cooking show was on. The host was smiling. I closed the laptop without labeling the file. I didn't delete it. I want you to know that. I kept it. I copied it to a USB drive, and then to another USB drive, and I put one of the drives in a safe deposit box at a credit union my mother used to bank with in Decatur, and the other in a tin under the floorboard of the closet in my bedroom. The original is still on my hard drive, in a folder I named after a recipe my mother used to make. I checked the metadata field once a week. It still says awaiting label. The timestamp updates every Sunday at 3:14 a.m., I have not opened the laptop at 3:14 a.m. I do not know who is updating it. I quit Verity Tile a week after the file arrived. The exit process was a single screen. We're sorry to see you go. Please rate your experience. There was no follow-up email. No final paycheck issue. No HR call. The platform simply stopped recognizing my login on the 7th day. When I tried to enter my username, the field accepted my keystrokes for a moment and then deleted them, one character at a time, from the end, as if a hand was reaching across the keyboard from inside the screen and tidying up after me. I told myself it was a cookie problem. I cleared the cookies. I tried again. The field deleted my keystrokes again, slower this time, in the rhythm of a person typing rather than a script running. When the last character was gone, a small line of gray text appeared in the empty field. Thank you, Tasha. It stayed for 2 seconds, then it was gone. But here is the thing I have to tell you. The thing that makes this letter necessary. A month after I quit, I started getting recruitment emails for other annotation companies. Different names, different platforms, different pay structures. Each of them, in the body of the email, included a line about my demonstrated consistency as an anchor labeler, and an offer to start at an enhanced rate. The phrasing was identical across companies that should have had no relationship to one another. I did not respond. The emails kept coming, twice a week, on Tuesdays and Fridays. They still come. The most recent one arrived this morning. It was from a company I had never heard of, with a logo I did not recognize, and a sign-up link that was personalized to my name. The body of the email was the usual paragraph: demonstrated consistency, enhanced rate, anchor labeler, but there was a postscript below the signature, in the same font but slightly smaller, the way APS is smaller in a letter from a relative. Your partner is asking for you. I did not click the link. I closed the email. I closed the browser. I closed the laptop. I taped a fresh piece of paper to the lid. 2 weeks ago, my mother, who has a hard time with names lately, and a harder time with faces, looked up from the cooking show we were watching and said, "The woman in the green hallway came back last night. She wanted to know if you'd finished." I asked her what she meant. She couldn't remember. She went back to the show. She has not mentioned it again, except once, 3 nights ago, when I was making tea in the kitchen, and I heard her say, very softly, from the living room, in a tone that was not quite her own, "Almost done." I went in. She was asleep on the couch with her mouth slightly open. The cooking show was on a commercial break. I'm writing to you because I want you to know that I didn't tag the picture. I want you to know that the file is safe, in 2 places, and that I check it every week to make sure the timestamp is the only thing that changes. I want you to know that I have not opened the laptop after midnight in 7 months, and that I have stopped using the desk by the window because the box fan made a sound at night I could not account for, and that I have started writing things down in a notebook because I no longer trust my own history view, my own memory, my own hands when I am asleep. I want you to know that whatever happened to you, whether you are still somewhere, whether the file is a record or a request, whether the smile in the hallway is yours or a copy of yours, or something that learned to wear yours, I am keeping it. I am not labeling it. I am not deleting it. I am holding it the way you hold a door for someone whose hands are full, and I will keep holding it for as long as I can, because I think that's what you wanted when you sent it, and because I think the alternative is worse than I can let myself imagine. There is one more thing. This morning, when I sat down to write you this letter, I opened a new document in a word processor I trust. I wrote the first sentence. Priya, if you're reading this, I'm writing it the way you asked me to write things. I went to make coffee. When I came back, the document had a second sentence in it, in a different font. I deleted it. I started over. I am writing now in a notebook, by hand, with a pen my mother gave me, and I will type it up later on a library computer and mail it to the address you sent me, on paper, in an envelope, with a stamp. I don't know if you'll get it. I don't know if you're the one who would receive it. But I wanted you to have it, on the record, in my handwriting, before whatever is next happens to me. I didn't tag the picture, Priya. I want that to be the true part. In the months after, Tasha keeps her routine deliberately analog. She writes by hand. She pays bills by check. She moves her mother's caregiver schedule to mornings only, and sleeps on the couch within sight of the front door. She has bought 2 new locks for the front door and installed them herself, badly, and she checks them at the same time every night. Because the act of checking has become a small prayer she does not believe in but cannot stop saying. The recruitment emails keep coming, every Tuesday and Friday, and she has stopped reading them but cannot bring herself to filter them. Because filtering would mean admitting they are addressed to her specifically, and admitting that would mean admitting that someone, somewhere, is keeping a list with her name on it, and is keeping it carefully. The file is still in 2 places. The timestamp still updates on Sundays at 3:14 a.m. Once, in February, the timestamp was updated on a Tuesday. Tasha drove to the credit union the next morning and checked the USB drive in the safe deposit box. The timestamp on that copy had updated too, at the same minute, on the same Tuesday, even though the drive had been in a sealed metal box inside a locked vault, inside a building she had not entered in 3 months. She put the drive back. She drove home. She did not tell anyone. Her mother has mentioned the woman in the green hallway twice more, both times in a tone that suggests they are old acquaintances. Once, she said the woman was patient. Once, she said the woman was running out of patience. Tasha has not asked her mother to describe the woman's face. She is not ready to know whether the face is Priya's, or her own, or the face of the woman at the sink, which she has begun to suspect was never a stranger's at all. The notebook by her bed has 37 pages of handwritten notes, dated and sealed. She has read back through them in order, and she has noticed that her handwriting tightens slightly around any entry that mentions the file. The loops get smaller. The slant changes. It is still her handwriting. It is still recognizably hers. But it is the handwriting of someone being watched while writing, and she does not remember being watched. The most recent entry, written 3 nights ago, reads, "The cursor moved while I was making tea. I was nowhere near the laptop. The lid was closed. I checked." Last night she opened the notebook to write the next entry, and the entry was already there, in her handwriting, in pen, dated tomorrow. It said, "I labeled it.